And I'm laying there like a turtle on his back, now for help.
Does Lori have a direct line? Do you have a direct line, or
Chop
do
down
you just
trees, I
call?
would think,
The
not breakfast.
extension is, the 2215 for the police department and 1203.
1203, okay.
Where you just, I thought, she's supposed to have a fire.
And I can actually give you my
Yeah.
cell phone number.
Well, for citizens.
Oh, well, yeah, it would just be that, yes, you would. And it does go straight to my cell phone.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So she can set a line out for him to do the.
Oh, they didn't have to take out, it was
I
all
understand,
first.
I'm picking up a script down now.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, wait, cut a pin.
Big hit.
Cut a pin in the floor. Have you heard from
The
me?
garage.
I text everybody to remind them.
I don't know why that's not straight.
See, Harold was in ours today.
I know, and I've talked to him a couple of times about
Because
it.
his camera said, don't fall asleep again, Harold.
Well, he knew right here.
So,
That's what he did last Tuesday.
Yes.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Or pay attention, I'm too busy.
Kept calling out.
yeah, and then it will.
Yeah,
have
I had to
sensor.
replace the line that did one line.
Yeah.
2 years ago. Or we're waiting, Mary has some spaghetti or
Oh, I
something.
know you could do that.
Replace the water line in too.
We had our water line.
Sure.
Not the outside.
There's a galvanized pipe in from the street. Well, it builds up inside. Staff, it was like a straw.
Oh, I'm sure ours is like that.
And so the water pressure was like non-existent.
I'm not doing that, I can't afford the water.
This is drink more alcohol than water.
Yeah, so you get bored, you won't help me put these cabinets together.
It sounds like a two-person job though.
I'm kind of like bummed.
I'm not gonna get it started this week, maybe when I get back.
After seeing, well, I probably need to help you out some evening.
Yeah.
Because there's some values for those instructions that don't make any sense.
Yeah, well, this
But
only
they're
takes 8
actually
hours,
correct.
and 2 days later.
Right. Yeah, the recommended time to put
Assembly
things
time,
together.
approximately assembly time is
Yeah.
90 minutes, that people.
Done it a time or two.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a double jointed Japanese applicant.
Yeah, I'll give him a couple of minutes here.
That is nice.
Yeah.
I basically did her, moved her for study session.
Force up.
Yeah.
I'll
So
pay
yeah,
it,
1203.
no, you can't zero one and flush the toilets. Every time I sit down, I went in there.
1203?
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Yes, it is.
They
Yep,
start
just making
about
sure.
9
I'm like, I
o'clock
probably
this
switched it
morning.
around in my head. But there's Maria's. I'm like, this is Maria.
I mean, I went one day without shower, I knew. I'm gonna be around people.
Go straight to my cell phone if I'm here, definitely answer, if not, then, okay, thank you.
Oh, yum.
Yeah.
Wow. I think we'll just skip to the dessert.
Okay. Just let her know we're waiting, we're waiting.
I tried to get the folks next door to come.
Yeah.
Mr. Spencer, still in West Virginia,
I'm
behind
gonna
closed doors.
have him over there.
I can think of worse places to be, but not too many of them.
Oh, West Virginia.
Yeah. You know where's that, West Virginia?
Sure.
Alright, thank you, appreciate it.
Boy, you text me back. It's better than being in Texas. Hey, good day.
Heck of a drive from Wheaton to here.
Well, we're in no rush.
I was moving.
No, business. Job. You were moving?
Yeah, down the interstate.
No.
It's nice that, Wyoming has 80-mile-an-hour roads up the interstate.
Yes, they do.
Not that it shortens up the distance, but it makes it go faster.
It's so scenic too.
I thought Chugwater Valley is pretty nice, like
Yeah.
the western landscape. In some parts out there, it's just a few more grasses than the desert has, really.
Yeah, if you catch it right in Chuckwater, you can watch the semis tip over in the wind.
Yeah, it's pretty nice up there right now. The wind's not too bad.
Hi Spencer, how are you? Good, I'm going to put you on speaker, we haven't started yet, we're waiting for, we'll probably get started now, but I'm gonna put you on speakerphone. Sure. Okay, sounds good.
I'll let you leave it then.
Thank you. Okay, here's Spencer.
Hi, Spencer.
He said he was gonna put it on mute.
Go ahead, Kathy.
He'll jump in. We'll ask him.
Those dinners are too hot. You know, it's at a senior center. Outside at the time. Yeah.
Well, we got, for girls, so I think that makes a big difference.
The one I was at was all fun.
No, it was, that's like it. Hot, that pretty hot night.
Wow. So they cook better than I deserve.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot, is what they were saying.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a nice little program.
Yes. For everybody to go ahead and get started then.
Sure.
All right, we're going. Spencer, can you hear us? Okay. Okay.
All right, thanks everyone for coming tonight. Tonight, the purpose of tonight is a study session to discuss code enforcement, which we typically do at least every other year. A couple years ago, we met, we did some amendments to the code. Last year, we really didn't have a full-time code official, so we saved Bill, which worked great, but it's what we had. Earlier this spring, we hired Maria Pena. I'm going to introduce her in a second. It's a pretty simple format, just some discussion on some items that Maria and I talked about since she started. I do want to announce that the mayor and I received this today from Rick Garcia, the executive director of DOLA. He acknowledges our receipt of our application, reviewed based upon various criteria, an extremely competitive grant process, more funds or more requests than funds available, which is not uncommon. But the most important paragraph is congratulations. After thorough review, I'm excited to offer a grant award in the amount of $200,000 to conduct your pilot study for the wastewater treatment facility. And he tells me to contact Don, and I already knows.
Oh, nice.
That's
So,
awesome.
that was awesome. That was good.
That's fantastic.
So,
Good
So
job.
water bills go back down then, or what?
I'm just hoping they don't go up more.
Yeah.
They will some, but if this pilot study is successful, then larger increases that are planned in the future can probably be reduced more likely.
Fabulous.
Because this new treatment solution essentially will cost about the same as a mechanized plant, but the annual maintenance operation cost will be significantly less. So that's our.
You know where they're at with, getting the roof from the state yet?
There, today, one of the engineers from JVA was sending permit review questions to Rocco at Safeville. That's part of their application. And this technology is not permitted through the 06 IBC, so I'm glad we did that recently. So they're going to permit through the 2015 International Building Code for Energy Code, and that'll be just fine. So once that process, I mean, it's almost done. They expect to complete it or submit it to the state in July next month, here in 2 weeks.
All right, good.
Fabulous.
Some hope.
Good job, Troy.
So the timing's coming together. I can't take full credit. JVA helped a lot on this application because they kind of talk, word it. I don't know how to speak that language, but I did some, they did some, so I'm happy with that. So going into tonight, first I want to introduce formally to the board Maria Pena, as I mentioned, and let Maria tell you a little bit about herself. And we met yesterday to talk about tonight's presentation. It's pretty informal. So once she does that, a little bit about her background, and then go into what she's been doing since she started, and pass out some information to the board so you're better informed on what she's enforcing. And then there's just a number of items we want to talk about as far as potentially amending or discussing, and most of it's focused on parking. So that'll be what, then we'll end up with the Q&A that we may have, or citizens may have. But Maria?
So first, I'll just pass these. These ones, not everybody is gonna have a copy, but you can just pass these down, and I'll explain what they are, okay, shortly.
You can get a copy.
You can, if you don't want to, that's right.
No, thank you.
I thought it was important the board understand how Maria approaches her job and notify citizens on violations, so you're aware,
Yes.
in case you were notified yourself.
So first, I'll just kind of,
Tell them about yourself first. Come on.
I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I actually worked for the Town of Platteville in about 2001, 2002 for code enforcement for about 2 years. Then I went to Greeley and I did code enforcement for 5 years in Greeley, and now I'm back. In between that, I did property management for USDA property. Wasn't for me, so I'm back here with code enforcement. My philosophy on code is not just to tell people what to do, it's more about allowing them to see why code is so important, which for me it's about the big picture, not the small picture. People tend to just look at it as big brothering. It is really just looking at the bigger picture and investing in the place you live. Yes, it's about being neighborly, it's about taking pride in where you live, who you live next to, and really taking that time to invest in your property and what you own so that the value continues to stay, and that'll allow your town or your city or where you're from to grow. So code enforcement is just not about telling people what to do. I enjoy code enforcement a lot.
She does.
So you're there.
Read the limit, love it.
Yeah. So it's there in code enforcement it is black and white a lot of the time. However, there are these areas where I get to be a resource for people. I get to help people. I get to allow people to see a different side. Information is the biggest thing for me. I really do like to inform people. So with that said, you will have my business card with my extension that does, even if it rings into the office or you call into the office, it will go straight to my cell phone, which I always have on me. The next one, some of you may have already seen these. These have been around for a little while. The ladies in the office, Devin, I believe, Mary and Charlotte are the ones who have the pleasure of making these. These are what I do hand out, especially when people aren't sure. The first step that I did was when I saw private property, I started to hand these out so that they would know that I was on my way, I'll be out here. So the ladies in the office were the ones who did these. So these are actually pretty amazing. This was one of the first information that I read through. It just kind of gives people a short idea about what's going on. The second item is a letter. So Travis Herger, I know most of you probably remember him. He created a letter that he was mailing out to people. I really liked that letter, and so I continue to use it. I tweaked it just a tad bit, but this is something I continue to use, especially for properties that have more than 1 or 2 violations. If it's a lot of stuff that I have to explain, this is a lot better to send out and post, mail. Owner always receives a copy of everything. So we can pass these down. So these are the notices that I created for myself, with permission, of course, from Troy. I like these. It's a carbon copy, so So one goes posted at the property, the other one goes mailed to the owner if the owner is not at the property. And then the third one is my copy so that I can keep record of what goes on. This is kind of just a shorter version of this letter. When there's one or two violations, and I can write it out and it gets my point across, this is what I'll use.
Fabulous.
So you wanna hand those down?
Sure.
This is like an art for you, isn't it?
So then, me and, myself and Troy, we did talk about quite a few things. Just kind of tweaking different wording, maybe using the experience I have to kind of look at different things and maybe put a little bit more information inside of the code. I know it's not something that people enjoy reading. Sometimes it's tedious because there's a lot of words in there that if you took those out would have a whole other meaning. So one of the things that we did speak about was the enforcement part of it. That at a certain point our enforcement ends and then somebody else will pick it up. So what myself and Troy, between the two of us, we did speak about requesting. Once they've gone into court and they have received a summons, that would be after 2 notices. So the first notice is just a friendly reminder saying, warning, this and this is happening, this is how we are requesting you correct it. The second notice does have on there, third notice will result in a summons to court. A lot of people have been calling, they have been asking for time, which I am okay with. I will give them the time because I'm not the only thing that's on their mind. There's people who have other issues. So with that, the third one is the summons to court. Once they go to court, the idea is for me to begin to request court-ordered compliance deadlines with a pre-authorization from the judge that if that person does not comply by that date, then the town would have the authority to abate whatever issue is happening at the expense of the owner. So we have talked about that, and that is something that he did want me to mention here. That way if you have any concerns, you have any questions about it, this would be
If I
the
may, can I add to that a little bit?
Yes.
So the way it's always worked basically is that once someone gets a summons for a code violation, for nuisance violation in court, say weeds or a junk car, we monitor after that, but we really don't contact them because they're in the system. They need to go in front of the judge, see the prosecuting attorney. Virtually every time when they go to court, that's the first time obviously the judge, prosecuting attorney has seen them, and they more than likely, if not always, give them another 30 days to the next court date to come to compliance, discuss what needs to be fixed, blah, blah, blah. But what happens is some don't, and then the judge will often, and I can't blame him because he wants to do a criminal matter, not nuisance matter, but they'll often say, well, you did this, this, and this, but the other half needs to be cleaned up, so let's go another 30 days. So what Maria and I have talked about, what she just explained, is that when they go to court, and the judge on occasion has done this, that instead of waiting 30 days because the violations are driving the neighbors crazy or whatever the case may be, that will give you 14 days for compliance to a judge's order, and if they don't comply, then the judge authorizes the town to abate the property before the next court date. And that's a process we want to try. Not in every case, but some people simply are going to ignore Maria, ignore me, and just refuse.
When we do the abatement of the issue, we pay for it, do we charge the owner?
When they come back to court, then that next court date, we present that information to the judge, the cost of it, what it may be, and we ask for restitution.
Okay.
And since the judge initially made the order, I'm sure he would have that restitution paid back to town.
No, that's fine. Sometimes in those cases, the judges, especially depending on the amount, they may just do a percentage of the abatement cost. If it looks to be, I know that everybody here, especially Troy, is very reasonable when it comes to things like that. You're not looking to bombard the citizens with certain issues or fines. So if it looks to be like these fines are outrageous, we can always have that option to request a percentage of those abatement costs to be paid back in restitution, not the whole cost itself, because that's going to be on top of court fees, fines, things like that, whatever else the court assesses against them. So that's always an option, so, you know, that way don't think that if it was $1,000 abatement, that's what we're gonna, you know, put on the citizens' shoulders on top of whatever else is happening in their life.
But, okay. Does Spencer, do you have anything to ask about that?
Are you there, Spencer?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm on mute, yes, the broadband was great. I was just thinking of how we would pursue getting that money back from them, you know, once we put this down, spend the money, it's hard to get, to make people pay, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah, that all sounds good.
Okay, and that's very true, Spencer, that, even when a judge assesses a fine, it's sometimes difficult to get the fine. Not always, but there's occasions, and working with the judge as long as I have over the years, we take that into consideration. I mean, he will flat out openly ask them, is this something you can afford, if not, why? And then he would schedule reasonable payment plans, if they need to be payment plans, or what case may be. And sometimes he'll waive it and they don't commit the same violation a second time, you know, so he's a very reasonable man, so.
And this would, and let's say they didn't pay, we would have to go to the scenario we had with a couple people on utility bills about a year ago where we pursue a collection effort.
Correct, we would go out, and we've done that before, we've had collections. So, doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
Is the abatement cost the cost of what we have to pay to get it cleaned up? Or is it, and then some?
No,
No, it would be just what we had to pay contractors in order to get that cleaned up, whether it was removing a junk vehicle, or cutting the weeds, or picking up the trash, whatever it is, it would just be the cost.
Okay.
We wouldn't add on, I don't believe that we would add on.
we don't, we can't, because the board has to authorize those fees, and we
Okay.
never approach the board to do that, so
Okay.
we don't want to.
No, I was just making sure. So if we have to abate the property and then they don't, you know, they only have to pay 20% of it, then it's on other citizens to pay for it.
Yeah, that's
True.
true.
Just a point of view.
What
What about
question?
from property lien?
On some cases, we can do that, such as property cleanup. Once you do the abatement, we've done that over the years too on occasions. In the years past, we used to have a contractor come in, and it was back in the day when some of the properties were foreclosure properties and the banks wouldn't respond. And after a month notice or 6 weeks notice, we try to give them every effort. And, getting a bank to call you back on overgrown yard is impossible. So in November, we assign it to abatement, the board authorizes those in the resolution, and we get our money back because they have to pay the property taxes. But on some things, that doesn't apply. So,
In the court proceeding, for the judge, who is speaking on behalf of the town?
Maria and the prosecuting attorney.
Okay, I just wanted to put that in the record.
Yeah, so I would be
Because
speaking.
you're asking for damages and,
Yeah.
and corrective activity and so on and so forth. Just wanted to make it
And
clear
really,
as to who is representing the town's interest in front of the judge.
yes, that would be me. However, I wouldn't actually be testifying, physically there. What they do is, I created just like this little paperwork for me, asking and requesting for that information. So I would send that to the court clerk, and the court clerk actually sends it to our attorney, and then he's the one who will verbalize my request in writing.
Okay. If it goes to trial, which some people do request a trial on code enforcement violation, then Maria would have to testify on that. Hopefully not. But actually, before Maria started, I testified in a trial against an individual on an operable vehicle situation involving tags. He had them, just wouldn't put them on his license plate. Problem is, state of Colorado requires you to display them on your license, on your registration. It is what it is, so.
Spencer, I just sent you pictures of the material that Maria provided us with.
We have a package of those.
Yeah, just so he knows what we're talking about, what we're talking about.
So some of the items that we did speak about were, one was the chicken code. So in the chicken code, there are certain setbacks that you do have to meet, especially with adjacent properties. One thing that we did speak about was that if there's privacy fences up setbacks are, yeah, it's 10 feet from the adjacent. That's a lot. If there's a privacy fence, do those setbacks, are they really necessary in that case? If there's a privacy fence. If there's not a privacy fence, then by all means, they would need that setback in order to have that space in between the adjacent properties and their coop. But with the privacy fence, so that was one thing that we wanted to see if we could tweak that code to state such. Privacy fence, there's no need for a 10-foot setback.
Yeah, somebody could put it in the corner of their property.
And that's where
Yes.
most people do wanna put it, because they don't wanna take up their backyard, if it's small.
Yeah.
And it makes a lot of sense. We talked about that, we wanted to ask the board if we could bring that to amend the code to not enforce the setback if they have an enclosed 6-foot privacy fence. Not chain link, but a wooden privacy fence there.
Right. Yeah.
Or vinyl, but something that you can't see and there's that separation.
Right.
With the chain link, that you would still have that issue where you would have to have the 10-foot.
Sure.
But with the privacy, most people, I think they would appreciate that.
Sure. What about the neighbors? Should we pursue the neighbors, ask them what they think in those cases? Is that what discretion?
That's kind of discretionary. The only time we require that is on the fence permits, we have to verify property line values.
Okay.
On the chickens, I think we're getting to another situation where neighbor may not like the neighbor, but that's not a real justification.
Absolutely.
So I think we need to treat everybody equally on that case, because it's not a property line dispute issue, it's whether they're gonna have their 6 hens.
Gotcha.
And the other thing was, and this was actually just kind of an afterthought, I don't really know who has chickens here. So I wanted to put out kind of a voluntary question as to volunteer information that you have chickens. That way we can kind of keep track of how many people are actually utilizing the fact that we can have chickens.
There's actually quite a few people in town.
And that's what I've heard, but I don't actually hear them.
So they'll have to have a permit, right? But it's only a permit once.
It's a one-time permit.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So, and she can research and go through all those in the last few years.
I can go through all of those and then see, and the other issue is the fact that you do have to have a permit for them. So if there's people out there who do not have a permit, then we can work with them and say, okay, you might not have known,
Here's the process.
Here's the process. The other, so I guess any other questions like regarding the chicken?
Is that okay with the
That
board?
sounds great to me.
Thank you, Spencer. So just clarify, the permit for chickens requires 10-foot setback unless you have a 6-foot privacy fence, and then the setback is waived. Okay.
I'm good with that.
And whatever amendments, we'll wrap it up into one resolution in a few
Or
weeks.
Spencer has chickens. Don't you, Spencer, you have chickens?
You know, that can be controversial, Troy.
Why is that?
Oh, wrapping everything into one thing. Now, somebody like me might say, oh, we should change that, and then you'd be mad at me.
Yeah, you signed up for this.
I don't wanna be scolding anybody anymore, Spencer.
Yeah.
I know, you have a chicken permit, but you don't have a privacy fence, you have to be the 10-foot setback, sorry, man. It is what it is. Okay.
The other, was RVs, trailers, boats, wrecked vehicles. So, right now, it's limit 2 per property. So if there's, long property and they have, it's subdivided, you can have 4, even though they're right next to each other on the same area. But we do have larger acreage properties that can house more recreational vehicles. So one of the things that Troy and I were talking about was changing the code to meet specific zoning. So if there's a specific area that's zoned a certain way, they can have more than just 2.
Like Shoal versus
Yeah, Shoal.
That's the only
32.5, that's pretty much the only subdivision that would be able to house, more. I say that because I was out enforcing, and after looking at the size of the lots and seeing that a lot of them do have more than 7, 5 or 6, that probably wouldn't be the best way to go, but to at least allow them a little bit more, because they do have that acreage in order to house that. As long as they are on a hard surface as long as, you know, either they're enclosed in a shed, a garage, or whatever, as long as they're following that portion of the code, if we could change the number of vehicles per zoning area, that's how we would look at that.
We had this discussion last year, remember?
Yeah, it does come up. Years ago, we changed it to where it's two, and it's commercial vehicles or wrecked vehicles and trailers. So maximum of two. It can be a mix, but some people will have a trailer and a boat and a camper and then some jet skis. So it's too much. And then, not all the time, but some of these properties are pretty small. But if you do by zoning and not property size, the only zone district we have is residential estate, which is Shoals, and those are all roughly acre-sized properties. And allowing somebody to have 3 or 4, and they can put them on a hard surface and it's not encumbering the property in the streets, it makes sense to me anyway. And what we try to explain to people is, if they have a large enough garage where they can put a boat and a trailer, what Maria enforces is 2 visible RVs or trailers or boats on the property. They can have 6, but only 2 are displayed outside the visible side.
So that's actually how when I was reading the code, that's how I had read, was that there can only be 2 that are visible. The rest of them, I mean, there are people who have, they have a boat, they have a RV, and then they have a trailer. But only 2 of those are actually either on the rock or on their driveway. The other stuff is housed somewhere else, or it's in a shed or a shop or garage, however they want. So that's how I am enforcing, is that exactly that way. If I can see more than 2, you gotta get rid of something. You can put it in your garage. I'm not telling you to sell it off or anything. You can house it somewhere else where it's an enclosed structure, and that's all of it.
Golf carts are exempt, is that right?
Your golf cart is exempt.
So, but
That's an RV.
No, that's not a recreational vehicle or trailer or boat, so you're okay.
Okay.
And these have to be put on concrete or gravel, is that correct?
Yes,
That's the second
that's
part.
the second part of it. So, second, thank you for going into there. So the second part of the conversation is, access. So, the way the code reads, it just says that these, vehicles have to be parked on a hard surface, but it doesn't say anything to access that hard surface. So people are driving over mud, dirt, grass, landscape, different things. So the wording, and I can actually get an idea, I can pull an idea of the wording I would prefer, but I also know that the lawyer would be the one to kind of go through that. So what I would like the code to read is the access to that hard surface where they're going to park their vehicle also needs to be in compliance with code. So that would just mean for all those people who have the rock or the gravel, they would just have to extend it a little bit longer.
Right.
That way they can access it from the street or alleyway, however they are, but that access is there, it's a hard surface.
Like if they have a side yard, but they have to go through their front lawn to get
Yes.
to their side yard?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's so many different things that they can use. There are pavers that they can use, and the pavers have to be pretty thick in order to be able to hold that weight. But when you're accessing everything and you're running over the dirt, the mud, you're running over your front lawn, landscaping, things like that, it just makes everything a bigger mess. And if there's a lot of people who are only parking the tires on hard surface, they're not actually pouring or putting the gravel spread out throughout the whole space where that RV or boat or trailer is. So that would take
Putting gravel under the tires.
right underneath the tires.
There's someone that I know in my subdivision that they have a recreational vehicle. I talked to them, very nice people, but instead of putting hard surface or pea, gravel, or rock underneath the entire RV, they put it just underneath the tires and the rest of it's mud, dirt, weeds.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, by the way, this code reads it's on a hard surface because it's touching only a hard surface. We want the entire parking area of that vehicle on a hard surface, because otherwise, it's just games, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't know why people can't just do it, I just don't understand.
And we're not trying to force
No.
people to pay a lot of money, but
Right, I was gonna say, if there's someone who, has a plan, they wanna do that, then they work with you as far as, okay, it's gonna take me, I can do this much this month, and I can do this much this month,
Sure.
and as long as they
Yes.
have a plan and you guys are all working together, that's acceptable, right?
Yes, it's when they just
Stop communicating.
Yeah, stop communicating and ignore the, you know, the attempts to talk to them or the notices posted or
Sure.
mailed to them.
Sure.
So yes, I actually have had quite a few people for fences
Mhm.
who have called and said, hey, I'm doing this house right now, can I do this house later?
Mhm.
So as long as they can call us and work with us, then it's perfectly fine. And I know that it's not the easiest thing to get a bunch of rock and lay it, especially some of these areas are they're pretty big.
Mhm.
I understand why they did it like that. It's a very large area, but it's a very large RV.
Mhm.
So the wording would just have to change a little bit, and it would allow them to understand that it has to be the whole parking surface as well as the access to that parking surface.
And I think we're meeting people halfway, because there's a lot of communities in Colorado that don't allow anything on your property.
Right.
Yeah.
And we don't wanna do that.
Well,
talked
we have
about
eight,
that.
there's a lot of places that have HOAs, and we don't have an HOA.
And we don't wanna go down the road, we wanna be, you know, a small community where people can enjoy their lifestyle, and they have something they can't have in HOA type communities. But there has to be give and take. I have a friend that has an RV, and we used to argue about it. I said, well, you know, if you can have this RV and you can afford it, $50 worth of pea gravel and laying down a hard surface is within reason to me.
Mhm.
And the other thing is, the cost of storage of some of these recreational vehicles. I mean, I don't know, I don't have one, but I know it's fairly expensive at times. So we're not gonna put people out. But I talked to a gentleman, when Maria was off for the weekend, that has a large car trailer, very big car trailer, very reasonable. And I really call him, but when he gets it out, that means he's moving it every 72 hours. He's racing. Otherwise, he made a place that's paved in his backyard, behind a fence, and he's willing to do the right thing, and we'll work with him. It's just, and that's another thing, as far as regulating camp trailers and RVs on the street, how long they've been on versus how long they've been gone. Having Maria here Monday through Friday helps a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because then you have that
I
weekend.
think that's what the big discussion we had last fall was people were saying, you know, this, they store it over here, and they close at 5 or whatever, they can't get in there to get it, and they have to get it the night before so they can load it and pack it and then unload. So I think the timing, I think we were talking about how many hours can it be on the street, and they kind of use that scenario, that stuff that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And, so I think, we were talking about how, as long as it's not, you know, it's not, we understand that they're using it for that weekend and the situation with the storage, but as long as they're not abusing it and leaving it there all week and stuff like that. So,
well, that's just it. You know, oftentimes there'll be a 3-day holiday weekend.
Yeah.
You know, they'll get it out on a Thursday, they take off on Friday, they come back Sunday late, nothing's open. So technically they're getting 96 or more, but it's reasonable. You gotta work with people.
Right.
yeah.
But if you just leave it out there for the whole week, then, nah, come on. You know.
Yeah.
For the most part, I can honestly say that the citizens of Platteville have a very good idea about the code that has to deal with the RVs, trailers, and boats. It's really rare that I actually have to enforce that. I'll mark on my calendar the addresses that I see that have them. By the next day, or even before the 72 hours is up, they're gone. It's actually pretty rare that I actually have to go out and say, hey, you need to move this. The couple times I have, well, the few times I have, there's a reason for it. You know, fixing where I usually store it, I have to fix it, I have to do this and that, okay, that's fine. And they're reasonable and they talk with me, but for the most part, people here in Platteville have a pretty good understanding of that code, and they follow it pretty well.
So is it okay if we amend the code? I'd like to, the definition of hard surface for parking on is a little loose. So let's define that a little bit better. And then the hard surface means the entire area in which the vehicle encompasses, not just the tires. And the access that we were talking about.
Spencer, do you have anything?
Yeah, I'm good with the parking, the total encompassing, but I really think we're pushing it, trying to make a driveway to get the recreational vehicle that may be used a couple times a year. You know, these people are driving on their own property to get to the RV, and if they're storing it in the manner that we laid forth, I will, you know, if they tear up their grass, that's their grass. I don't see that encumbrance too much personally.
My parents live in Windsor, and they have, you know, pretty strict code enforcement there, but they have a big RV, I mean, it's a huge RV, and it's next to the house, there's behind the fence, and it's just, they just drive it over the grass, park it back behind the fence, close the gate, and, you know, but
As long as, the main thing is we're not wanting, the grass is probably fine, but some places it's just dirt, gravel, and mud, and
So-
that's putting it on the streets.
Yeah, what are the, oh, so they're driving over their dirt and now the sidewalk is all dirt.
Sidewalk is all dirt,
muddy.
or they're causing like giant divots in certain areas where they do have it parked, which if we can compromise that and say, okay, yeah, we're gonna open it up to the whole entire space, not just under the tires, and do it that way.
What if we address the mud on the sidewalk and if we address that versus making them change their yard? Could
Like
we
to
do
do
something
that.
like that, Spencer? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that sounds more reasonable. I agree with you. Shouldn't make the public right, it shouldn't affect the public right away when you do
And
that,
that-
such as a sidewalk. But
Right.
if you do something to your own property, I don't see that as a problem. That's your personal problem,
And
not a
that-
town problem.
And that's what we're trying to get at, and that's what the issue is,
That makes sense, so,
so,
mhm.
okay, we can do that.
If we were to, you know, make sure they keep the sidewalk clean
Or not to, or cause some sort of destruction to public right of way when they're accessing whatever parking surface they're on.
yeah, something like that.
And there's properties where I've been approached over the years, they have a fence and they wanna make a gate to put their RV or their camp or their trailer, but they're driving through, I'll bring up Rogers Farm, for example, or Greenville on Strip of Boulevard, and I told people, no, that is not an access. That is a public open space, you're not to do that.
Okay.
And they're reasonable, they've been okay with that. The main area we've looked at is if you go down behind the old First National Bank, the property on Bella Vista, most of those properties have a gate access
In the back there.
in the back, and there's a legal public right of way from Main Street to the old Shell gas station, or the Patch Grill. But if you look at the assessor's office, it doesn't go up to the fences. That is bank, or community banks and bank, First National Bank, property.
Right,
We put the barriers in there to keep the semis from blocking it,
from parking.
because that was needed. But, then we also have a ton of utilities, water, sewer, and electrical.
Right, and that applies for down Grand Avenue too.
The one is Mr. Rupel, and we're
Yes.
very open with him, he asks us every year,
He takes good care of it.
and he does, and he asks us every year where we're gonna build a sidewalk, and, because he's prepared for that. And that was authorized before I came here, and I don't wanna say the grandfather, but that's a rarity.
Sure.
But, it's not every place is the same as far as property and land and streets and right of way.
Right.
So we have to deal with that. But,
Okay.
Okay.
the only other thing, I know we talked about last year, and I really don't wanna make any recommendations, is because we had Kendrick get involved with this, but the number of vehicles parked on the street in residential areas, mostly, I'll be blunt, mostly in Rogers and Old Homestead. As Kendrick advised, unless we're willing, the board's willing to regulate the number of vehicles parked on the street and have a full-time parking officer, that is something that, is very difficult to enforce.
Yes.
And I'm not waving here, but I just want the board to know that we do get approached on a regular basis
I
about that.
I do as well. It's a huge concern, but, you know, as the price of living increases here, we have multiple families living together
That's the.
because they can't afford to live on their own. So I have 2 homes down the street from me that have at least 3 families living in one home. And that with, man, usually 2 cars per family, we got a minimum of 6 cars.
So, exactly, so what we've talked about is, doing a little bit of better enforcement in the ways we can. For example, the post office boxes of the subdivisions, we're gonna paint those up, probably 10, 15 feet, because those been blocked, post
Yes.
office complaints, can't do that.
Right,
Make sure fire hydrants aren't blocked.
right.
And there's some corner areas that are hot, you can't, visibility's terrible. So not park on the curb or the corner
Right.
on some areas because of visibility.
Right, so my big complaints come when there's a lot of people parked there and we have people parked on their grass. There's people parked on, facing the wrong direction. So, they're not following the rules of the road, I guess, if you will. And then, yeah, they're parked on their grass, their lawn, and so those are the big ones I hear, so.
Yeah, I hear about all of them kind of lumped into one. The grass, I know that, so during the day when I'm here, I don't really see that in, Stevens or in Rogers. I do, however, see it in Old Town.
Right.
So I will see people parked on grass and they've kind of, already made these divots where they park constantly on the dirt. So those are the ones that I'm addressing at this point, but I do hear about, just what Troy was speaking about, the, 12 cars at night, for one house, and then in between, there's a specific area that I get calls on regularly, for the number of vehicles. And that's one thing I have told them, I can't enforce on the number of vehicles. I can't tell somebody how many cars they can have, especially if, I have 5 kids, I have 2 teenage boys,
Right.
plus me and my husband, so I already have 4 cars.
Right.
And then I have more kids coming up, so, but the other issue to kind of look at is do the enforcement that we can, like you said, and parking on the grass, that would be one. I also have noticed that a lot of the people that do park on the grass or they have multiple vehicles, they do have IOVs, are inoperable vehicles on their property. Which, if I enforce on the inoperable vehicles, removing that, those open up some parking spaces where they should be. So I've noticed that that's kind of happened with a few people. They're parked on their grass or they're parked, on different areas of their property. Once they get rid of the inoperable vehicles, then they have spaces that open up. And it's just enforcing on certain items so that we can get that, a little bit of resolution to that parking issue.
Okay. Spencer?
All good to me.
Fabulous.
Is it illegal to park the wrong way?
Yes.
I should stop doing that then.
That'd be a good idea, Spencer.
The other thing I brought up with Marie, but mostly the police department, is I see on occasion, not always, but people parking their tires on the sidewalks. And I have advised the police department not to issue warnings, just to give them a ticket.
Okay.
I don't want that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but you're blocking. And besides parking on the sidewalk, you're parking in a driveway where you're blocking the sidewalk, that's another issue. We have to give warnings for that, because a long truck or
Yep.
that I'll probably give a warning for, but when they're just flat out parking their tires on the sidewalk, sorry, I'm gonna get a ticket. So I told them, officer, if you see it, write them up. It's not a big ticket, parking the sidewalk.
It used to be a bumper sticker that said, if you don't like my driving, stay off the sidewalk. These are parks.
Is that a no, not getting move your car ticket?
What's that, I'm sorry?
Is that they're not gonna even try to make contact with you to see if you're gonna be able to move it, they're just gonna give a ticket?
Yep.
Well, if it's there and I don't know what excuse I can listen to that somebody is parking on the sidewalk deliberately with their tires on it. I can't think of anything that somebody can tell me to convince me that that's right.
I totally agree, it's the kinda hanging over the sidewalk.
Hanging over, exactly, hanging over would, notify them, give them a warning, which we do. Cause that, I had a neighbor that had a small trailer and he was hanging over on the pickup. I said, put your trailer in the backyard, and he got room, you'll walk the sidewalk, and he did. He just wasn't thinking of it,
For sure, I think that deserves a warning, I guess if you're in your driveway, just over the line a little bit.
Sure.
I think it deserves a warning first.
Sure.
It's up to you guys.
No, and I agree, but I don't want the board to know that's how we're enforcing. Give a warning for just overhang on the sidewalk, but if you're just flat out parking.
Right.
No, we invest too much in our sidewalks, we got a long way to go, you know that.
Absolutely.
I do need to step out and talk to someone real quick, and I'll be right back. Marie? Okay. What do you just leave? Okay. I'll give him a call. So, those were most of the parking items that Maria and I talked about, just from, you know, before Maria started, we were trying to address, and things that she and I talked about that are kind of ongoing. There's people in town that'll have 2 wrecked vehicles and 2 commercial vehicles, and when we explain to people, if they're visible, you have to reduce the number. And then, we had conversations, because where she worked in Greeley for 5 years, obviously is different here. Greeley requires so much of the yard to be watered and irrigated, which we've never required.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They require specific percentages, so we would have to reassign, a certain amount of square footage to each, plants, flowers, trees, bushes, shrubs, grass, rock, things like that. So depending on the square footage of your property, you have to have so much square footage of live plant. So you could concrete and rock, but you had to have something, so we had to design their landscaping for them pretty much, to tell them, okay, so you have this much rock, now you have to put trees and shrubs in these specific areas, and each one was like 25 square foot, 10 square foot, 5 square foot.
Wow.
Yeah, but their water's not as expensive as ours.
Their water is not. However, even in drought season, when we had the drought, they were still requiring people. The only thing they changed was that it could be 75% rock, cement, xeriscape. So they allowed xeriscaping, but you still had to have live plant. 25% of your property has to be live plant, even in drought season.
That seems like an HOA thing.
Seems like we awfully heavy-handed.
Yeah.
It actually was. There was a lot of people who, and they did not like that at all.
So we don't do that for residential, we do have an 8% landscape requirement for site plans, for property, for businesses, and not Main Street, but,
Right.
like the energy park, when that developed back in 2011, 2013, that's our gateway from the north, we want to have a nice appearance. I think overall it does, because the developer and the lot owners up there adhere to that 8%. Those are most of the parking issues. We talked about dogs, a variety of different things. I passed on to Maria what I've been hearing or what I've heard in this last year. I haven't heard as much as previous years, so.
As far as dogs?
As far as dogs and just other stuff, I mean, there's always gonna be overgrown weeds.
Yeah.
Maria's working with some properties in town that the properties are essentially vacant, that they're owned, so we can have others come in once in a while to clean them up. Some properties,
About dead trees.
dead trees are next.
Yes, dead trees are next.
So the ordinance is fine. When Travis Herger was here a couple years ago, he sent out notices, over 160 notices, and he got about 50% compliant.
Yeah, there's some properties that have dead trees on their
And
property.
we talked to wait until about midsummer when we know for sure they're blooming, they're supposed to be. And I'm gonna sit down with Maria when I get back from seeing off not tomorrow, about site plans, because these industrial sites, like in my yard, if I would take out a tree, I'll have to replace it, it's my discretion. Site plans on these industrial business properties that are required, if the tree dies or whatever, they have to replace it, it's required to have that amount of land.
There's some up there, you park along.
Yep.
And there's some dead trees, some small, but it happens, they just need to replace it.
But they do have to replace them, so, that will be coming, so the dead trees and the site plants. Right now, I've been working on weeds, of course, and in alleyways. I've had a lot of good response for the alleyways. I was just actually driving everything today, mainly just kind of working the entire town. So one of Troy's requirements of me is that I do drive the entire town on a daily basis. How I do that is at my discretion, so I can do half of it in the morning, half of it after lunch, or just hit it all in the morning before lunch, and then do admin work in the office. Mail out all my notices, get my stuff updated. So right now, that's pretty much what I've been doing, is just going down each of the streets, each of the alleys. With the alleys, there was a lot of people who just kind of forgot about the alleyway. So,
you sometimes, that's.
yeah, it happens, their house is immaculate, and then you go to the alley and you're like, huh. So I've sent out letters, working on the alleys kind of in sections. I've sent out letters, and the letter is, it's just a friendly reminder, saying this is a reminder. Just please remember while you're working on your landscaping that you don't forget this portion or any public right of way that may be adjacent to your house. We do have quite a few people that are growing trees and stuff on the corners, and they don't really know or understand that they do need to cut those trees back in order for the line of sight to not be an issue. So that's kind of what I've been doing. And aside from that, just posting those pink notices. They're very visible, so people are not, I think they're getting used to it. I think people are starting to see them more and more, so they're getting used to the bright pink notices on their doors. And so I do a mixture of everything. I send out letters, notices, I mail to whoever I can so that everybody's informed, especially owners who have tenants in the property. And then I do post to the properties. There's on occasion where I will post the letters to the properties, just because it seems a lot easier to post and mail.
Green also met with, we have a lot of rentals in town, and instead of just dealing with each tenant, we meet with primarily one, but we meet with the people who own those properties and just have a general conversation about, so you have 20 properties, you have 10 properties. And it's interesting because the conversation we had, I mean, most of the properties, he said, I'll take care of the properties, I'll get it cleaned, I'll fix the fence, blah, blah. But on these properties, notice that, we need to do it. So we don't know that until we talk to people.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's tenant or tenant or owner, occupant or owner. And whoever's living there is actually the one that's going to get in trouble first, unless the owner of the property who's leasing it or renting it will get involved. So we've taken that extra step to kind of, so we don't have the go-between or the confusion, so.
And again, I do mail every notice I post to a property. I do mail it, whether I mail it directly to the owner because they live there, or to the owner because the tenant lives there. That way everybody's informed of the same exact thing. I do have a few people who have called me and asked me directly, because they're not in Platteville all the time. They have asked me to call them or email them whenever an issue arises. So I've agreed to do that, because I'm not here to big brother people, but I am here to just get to compliance is the ultimate goal. And if that requires that I go a little bit out of my way to call somebody, email somebody, or knock on their door directly and tell them, hey, your property over here on the street is. So there's been a lot of people who have been very receptive.
I think the last thing we have is, for any questions you may have for the public, is signs.
Yes. So right now the sign code is actually very nicely written. The only thing that there is nothing in the sign code that states that people cannot put signs on fences. So at this point, people can start putting signs on fences. It does say they cannot put signs on any portion of public right of way, but that does not encompass everything. So there are certain fence areas where they can put signs up at this point. It doesn't say anything else. So we were wondering if we could add that wording into the code. Right now there is a code that says you can't advertise your home occupation. There's a code that says you have to have a permit and your signs have to be a certain size, and you can have your sign up for a certain amount of time. But if people wanted to, they could start putting signs all over their fences if they. So if we could place some wording inside of the code that states signs are prohibited, whether in right of way or on private property, from being posted onto the fences.
And that's the touchy one, I'll admit that one. To me, there's a difference between a for-profit and putting a Valley Vikings banner on your fence according to Valley Vikings. I mean,
Yes.
people be doing that. But
Yeah, but those are temporary signs.
and those are temporary, that's the
Yeah.
biggest difference. But for-profit signs, as Ray indicated, we don't have too many, but there are some. And we just wanna make sure you're fully aware that per the code, as of right now, the home occupations that are for-profit, they're making money, they're not you know, just supporting saying a statement temporarily, then, you know, vote for Adrian for mayor kind of a thing. Probably a bad example, sorry.
Jeez.
Give me a bad example, but I don't be accused of anything, sorry, but that is gonna be a touchy one, and you may hear about it, but it's time to enforce that, to be honest with you.
How does that interact with, like garage sales, estate sales?
Those are
I mean,
temporary.
they're considered temporary and not for profit, I assume.
Exactly, exactly, those are exempted. In the sign code, there's certain ones that are exempt, and there's certain ones that require a permit, and there's certain signs that just can't be allowed.
And is there anything in the code about if your sign is damaged, you have so much time to get it fixed?
That's why the liquor store
That's why
sign is
the
no
liquor
longer
store
there.
sign is down. It was either fix it or take it down, because it can't be there, so they took it down.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, they just have a pedestal because there's
Still
a
drinking on it.
Yeah.
She has home delivery.
I didn't have to count it.
All right, before this goes much further south.
So with that said, as of right now, again, I'll just kind of repeat, with home occupation, it does state that you cannot advertise your home occupation. You're allowed to have that permit to have your home occupation, but you cannot advertise it in any way, shape, or form.
There's a small sign that
Small
can be
sign
attached
that can
on
be
your front
attached.
property.
But that is it.
Okay.
And then per permits and sizes, there's a few places that are in violation of that as well. So once I do start enforcing, and placing all of this in writing and handing out the warnings, I do just want to know that with the way the sign code is written, we can enforce. If we can also add the wording in there, fences, right-of-ways, whether it's on private or public property. And then know that when that enforcement does come down, if there are any issues or if there is any inconvenience that's made to anybody here within the city, that I would have that support from the board.
You got it.
Yep.
I mean, it depends on, what it comes down to, how do you envision your community look like on a daily basis? And we're not near as strict as a lot of other communities, but I think it's within reason. And things change over time, I get that, but, it's hard. And even when I started here 15 years ago, and as chief, and the board at the time said, go enforce codes, like, well, right away I found over a dozen garages that were built way over the size that code allows, you know, I mean, you're dealing with things, we're just trying to establish consistency. And Maria's the first, I've had some code officers that have done some good work, and I enjoyed working with. Maria loves this job, it's crazy, I've never seen anybody, she smiles when she comes to work, and she smiles when she leaves, and I don't know how she does that. But, the other asset is with the previous experience working for GPD, City of Greeley, dealing with code as her career, if I may say that. But also being bilingual, being able to communicate with every person in this town, has gone a long, long way.
Sure.
And it helps explain to everybody equally what the issues are. I mean, working everything from Schultz to south of Bella Vista, Rogers over to Front Street, so.
Spence, I think he has something to add.
Hey Spencer, you still there?
Yeah,
Okay.
Do you have anything to add?
I am, sorry.
Did you want to add anything to what we just talked about?
I just wanted to make sure we're still gonna have a provision for people to have a sign if they have a home business, it just can't be on a fence, is that what I heard?
Pretty much it, that's it in a nutshell.
Or is it front yard?
It has to be in the front yard, and there's specific sizes.
I just don't wanna stifle home businesses, cause that's a growing sector, I feel.
Oh, absolutely not, but, in my mindset, if you wanna have large signs promoting your business to make money, then you probably should operate a legitimate business on a home occupation.
Commercial building.
Is it
Right.
fair to assume that, these word changes, however, some of them are pretty small, but
Yeah.
that you're gonna rewrite the code to incorporate these changes, and that whole change will be brought before the board for its approval in the
Yes.
near future?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because we can't make these changes until the board adopts the ordinance.
Correct.
And we wait 30 days, and then it goes into effect.
Yep.
So it'll probably be later this summer. No sooner than August, into August, because of the way the names are set up.
Right.
Kendra and her department will
She'll get
pass the
our-
holy water over the
Yep.
changes.
And then just one last thing before we do, so the other thing is, I think I said at the beginning, I'm really big on information, very big on information. And I know that, I think we've talked about it a couple of times, but workshops for people. So what I've come across is there's actually quite a few people who have no idea that you need to have a building permit for certain things. They think that huge gigantic projects are something that you would need building permits for, and there's other things, just small little things. If in the future, when the season, kind of this growing season ends, you know, with the permission of Troy and board, of course, to set up some designated days where we will have workshops for those people who are looking at building projects, looking at maybe redoing some things in their landscape, maybe, you know, getting an RV, maybe, you know, they wanna make some changes to their property, but they really don't know how to start. I think that would help, them to not warm up to code, but, yeah, warm up to code a little bit more, so that they know that it's not just about enforcing, but it is about bringing the information to them, so that they don't have to struggle in the long run, and they don't have to get those retroactive permits, and they know, and I know that the ladies at the front, they have, the utility, when people come in to fill out utilities, the information, they give them this information, and they stress to them that it's very important to read this. However, people aren't going to read that, but if you say, hey, we're gonna have an informational workshop for you regarding this information, I think that would help them a little bit more, so that they can kind of get on board with the whole code enforcement thing and really understand that it's really not just about the enforcement, it's about investing in your community.
Right, so have you done this in other communities?
Yes.
And people loved it? And-
So, well, Greeley is really big, and we really don't have a lot of, the attendance to these, when we first started, it was pretty low. One thing is that if I make them bilingual, or if I have a Spanish workshop and then I can do an English workshop, people started to kind of get the idea, and then those people who were looking at doing projects on their own, they liked the fact that we would open it up to have a workshop and explain. And again, in Greeley, it was more landscape, because there were so many people that needed to have landscape on their properties. So we would help them design, we would help them answer their questions about what works, what fits. Here, I'm still working out what type of workshop, but I know for sure one of the workshops I would wanna do would be, building permits, just permits in general even. You know, you need a chicken permit, you need a fence permit, you need a building permit for this, this, and this. For the dogs, you know, if you have dogs, you can have this many, you know, things like that, so that people would feel a little bit more open to code and know that I'm not just here to tell them what's true.
And then we can open the door, and then we can also have someone from Safeville here. If somebody wanted to talk about specific building requirements, you know, it'd be nice to have somebody on hand to say, you know, you can't build a fence out of just 4x8 sheets of plywood and chicken wire. Sorry, it doesn't work. This is what's allowed. I mean, we get that.
We actually do.
Are you gonna be looking for, when you drive around, if you see somebody's work, like adding a garage to their, you're gonna see if there's a permit on their property, if not, just let them know that they need a person permit.
So the way it works now is Safe Built is actually the one that does any type of stop work order for them. They have not asked me to do a stop work order yet, but I have informed them when I do see somebody working on something, I'll call the office and ask, is there a permit? And if they say no, I'll hand it over to Safe Built, and Safe Built will come out. Safe Built is not, they do not put a heavy hand on anybody. They talk with the person, and for the most part, they say the same thing. They just didn't know. They thought that if it was this way, they didn't need a permit. They thought that if it was this way, they didn't need a permit. So Safe Built is also in the business of informing people. They're really not here to, you know, strong arm people into doing certain things, but I think they would be on board with having a mini workshop. And I would say closer September, October, November,
Yep.
when the season is slowed down and people have the time to come in hour and a half and just ask questions if they want. But, that would be kind of introducing that next season when everybody builds, when everybody changes, everybody does their spring cleaning.
Sounds good.
One last thing that Maria and I talked about, just thinking of it, is the water and the irrigation. We talked about our town regulations. We're currently on what's called stage 1 voluntary. So sometimes people get confused. If it's voluntary, they can just water anytime. Even with stage 1 voluntary, unlike stage 2, where like me, my number's 205, so I water an odd number of days, 3 days a week. If I don't, I'm not in violation under voluntary. But you still cannot water, period, from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. no matter what, unless you have a well. So I've asked Maria to start giving warnings initially, to warn people. We're not under any water restrictions, but we still, no matter what the water or the climate is and the availability, we still need to conserve water.
Well, we don't make laws so that people can break them.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And the only exception to that is someone has new sod, and we give them a 30-day permit at no cost, and they can water every day. So, usually that comes up, but it hasn't really this year, because at this point, with what, 400% or 500% snowpacks still in the mountains, I'm not recommending to the board any restrictions this year.
Yeah, didn't it say it was 75% or 70%?
Our quota?
Yeah.
Our quota is like 80, I think, maybe 75.
Okay.
But
Still.
it's still, we're in okay, we're in good shape.
Right.
I think last year we had almost 200 acre of water carry over, and I don't foresee that. And looking at the revenue as far as what people are spending on watering right now, I mean, they're not doing a whole lot right now as far as the town-wide, based on the financials I just saw earlier this week. Because I gauge all those specific line items on what's been used and what's not. The building permits are coming in a little bit more, and it's not residential, it's commercial. Anything else you can think of for that?
When I give a warning, it's only a verbal for the watering. I don't post a notice or anything, I'll just knock and talk. If they're not there, I'll put my business card and let them know that water restrictions, that's pretty much it. Unless they're doing it over and over again, then that's when I'll go ahead and start with the process. But for watering, it's been just a knock and talk so far. Sure.
Is there anything you want to ask Maria or myself that you've heard that recap anything that we talked about tonight? Most of it was parking, because that's been the biggest issue. And the worst complaint is the on-street parking. We can't control that except making sure they don't block alleys, driveways, fire hydrants, post office boxes. And they don't park just in the front yard.
Facing the entrance.
Oh, you mean in
Yeah.
the front right door, when they're right next to their front door?
What's that?
When they're parking in their front yard, right next to their front door?
Yeah.
Well, and Spencer, from now on, you park the right way, okay?
Yes, sir.
Good answer. Just making sure you're still on there. That's a good point that Hope made up is, the fear I had in some of these communities, it's not a fear, but I see so many people, like they're taking out their front yards to gravel or pave it or park it, and they really haven't done that yet, but we have, the way the code reads is you're parked in your designated driveway, there's side yard setbacks on a hard surface, or of course in your back if you have that availability. Some people are making their own driveways in their front yards. Some have been that way. We've had some circle drives. I mean, Mr. Johannes right next door has a circle drive. It's all paved, looks nice. But when you make a temporary makeshift in the dirt flooded circle drive in front of your house and you have a driveway, that's not allowed. If that makes sense. So we're gonna kind of enforce that a little more stricter. And Marie's already given notices on that.
Yes, I have given notices and I have heard the same thing. But I've done this for 5 years. Can't do it anymore, sorry.
You're right.
I'm new.
I was 5 years. I wasn't here 5 years ago.
That does happen.
The real question, Spencer, is does the board and the town want properties using their front yards as a parking lot? And that's what it comes down to. Because if you open that door, it's gonna open wide.
Right.
People will take out their front yards, they'll grab the whole thing, and it's their parking. You'll alleviate the on-street parking, but you'll just have parking right across the whole front yard. So it just depends on what you wanna have.
Yeah, we don't wanna have that, Spencer.
No, I see it, but if you, like, I'm gonna use my next door neighbor as a perfect example. He's got a fenced-in front yard, but there's 10 feet of the right off the road, 10, 12 feet outside of his fence that he uses to park on. That's actually one of the main examples I have. If he graveled that, I wouldn't see it as a terrible problem because he still has a front yard that's fenced off.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, look at Grand Avenue, all the right of way on Grand Avenue.
Well, you know, Spencer, we just don't want them parking in front of their front door and getting out and walking into their house.
Unless they have an authorized surface right.
Right.
But you're right, if it's a right of way and they're parking, and some of these need to put a little bit better surface down so that you can park. I told one gentleman that wood chips is not considered a hard surface. True story, but yeah, you're right, Spencer. I mean, that would kind of be an exclusion because that's, not all of Old Town, but Grand Avenue especially. They have their fence, a lot of those front yard are fenced, and then they have 10 feet of right of way between the curb and the sidewalk where they park, and they do, and we allow that. Yeah. Lincoln, there's some sections over there, Marion.
Has some.
In some places, they've taken a section of the front yard between the curb and the sidewalk out, and they've gravelled it. They still have a front yard, but then they just, instead of parking the street, they just park on that right of way.
So their cars are between the front door and the sidewalk.
And those, and we have a lot of those.
There's actually quite a few of them.
But I'm talking about, parking up to your front doorstep, basically, there's no front yard whatsoever.
They were intended. Front yard with vehicles.
Yeah.
Those buildings were intended to be like that though. They were built that.
You can tell that.
Okay. All right, I think that's all we have. And, it's probably one of the easiest coach sessions I've ever.
It helps when you have someone who likes your dog.
It
You
is.
actually expanded more than you contracted. I'm shocked here, personally.
What do you get back in town, Spencer?
Right.
Yeah. In the morning.
All right, Maria will be watching for you to park in front of your house, okay?
What was your address again, sir?
I'm sorry, I was working on my profit.
Just park the wrong way so they'll know who it is.
I'll tell Maria to leave your wife and girls alone, just talk to you directly, how about that?
I think that's a great idea.
Thanks, Spencer. We're done for the night.
Bye.
Welcome, Maria.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye, Spencer.
That's all we have for tonight.
Bye.
Okay.